bring in national political correspondent for NBC News and MSNBC, Steve Kornacki. Steve, as you look at some of these pollings, you put it together with your map. What are some of the scenarios you see playing out here?
Yeah, let's take a look here at the road to 270 and what you see. This is how things landed in 2016. Of course, Trump with 306. But let's work off those poll numbers you were just going through right there, because I think three states you were just talking about them really jump out, and it's Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And remember, when Trump won those states in 2016, in all three of those states, his margin was less than a point. It was a fraction of a point. And, of course, these were also states that had not gone for a Republican in 3 decades, since the 1980s. So these were narrow wins in traditionally Democratic states that made all the difference. From how important are these states for Trump? Look at it this way. Those polls we just showed you, if Wisconsin went to Biden, if Michigan went to Biden, and if Pennsylvania went to Biden, those 3 states alone that Trump won by the skin of his teeth in 2016 would put Joe Biden over the top. And Trump would be in a position at that point. He could win Florida. He could win Carolina. He could win Arizona, Georgia, Texas, Ohio, Iowa, everything else you mentioned. He could sweep them if he does not get one of those 3 Midwest states that he flipped in 2016. He's under 270. He doesn't win the election. The only other thing he could do at that point is he could pick off a state that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. But then you're in a world where he's losing these 3 states, but somehow winning Minnesota. He's losing these 3 states, but somehow getting New Hampshire and Nevada. It becomes implausible if he can't hang on to at least one of these battleground states. And certainly his campaign has been treating Pennsylvania with 20 electoral votes as their most likely target there in terms of their time, in terms of their resources. You can see if Trump did find a way to hang on to Pennsylvania, okay, now he'd be back to 280. He'd have to defend Florida. He'd have to defend North Carolina. He still would have a very, very small margin for error. But just to stay in this thing on election night, that's one way of looking at it. I think these 3, he's got to find a way to win at least one.
And, of course, Steve, if he doesn't win Florida, Katie, bar the door. It's over. Right now, there are 2 polls that came out showing Joe Biden up by 4 points. That's hard to believe. It's hard to believe, again, talking to the people that know this state better than anybody else. It's hard to believe that this race is going to be decided by more than 1 percentage point. Talk about Florida and how actually the results that we get in, because we've been talking about weeks. You know, we may be doing this for weeks and weeks and months and months. Of course, the alternative to that is the fact that Florida could let us know by 9 p.m. on election night who's going to win in either direction. I remember in 2004 seeing the numbers come out of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County, what Republicans call the killing fields, every 4 years. And I saw that George Bush had far outperformed how he did in 2000. And I turned to everybody on set then and said, this is not going to be 2000. George Bush is going to win Florida fairly comfortably and most likely win the rest of the country that way. Talk about what we may know actually by 8 p.m. election night.
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing, Joe. In Florida, they were kind of doing COVID-style elections before COVID. Extensive mail-in voting, extensive early voting, getting them all tabulated and reported out quickly so that, yeah, I think we're in a situation in Florida on election. These are famous last words, of course, because once upon a time in 2000, Florida was a disaster on election night. But if nothing like that happens, we're in a situation in Florida where we're going to get in that first hour when polls close in these counties, all their early vote and all the mail-in vote that they've tabulated, and then the rest is going to come in most of these counties very quickly. And you're going to be able to look at counties in Florida, places along the Gulf Coast, for instance, where at about 8:30 on election night 2016, you could see Trump was running up the score compared to Mitt Romney 4 years earlier, where turnout was through the roof and where you could say, okay, something is happening there in Florida. And then you could quickly work your way up and say North Carolina, you saw it, the Midwest, you saw it. But by 8:30, election night 2016, you had a sense that the political world was changing because of Florida. That could be the case again on election night 2020, because, again, I just reset it to 2016. If Biden were to get Florida, and you say it's possible you get a result there on election night relatively early, if Biden were to get Florida, that alone brings that total from Hillary Clinton's 232 to 261. That's not enough for Biden, but that puts him in a situation where basically any one other state, look, I just said Pennsylvania, but could be Michigan, any one other state with Florida pretty much would put him over 270. So, yeah, Florida kind of sets up as a state with the potential to get a lot of its vote in, to really give us a readout. And it kind of sets up as an early, almost elimination contest for Donald Trump. He's got to win it. He's got to win it. And we're going to get Florida and I think potentially North Carolina in those early hours. A lot of Carolina, at least.
Wow.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.